You've probably heard of the idea of pacing when people talk about movies, books, TV shows, but did you know it's a skill that you can use to improve your game as a GM? Despite it being a key skill at building crucial moments at the table and in keeping players invested, it's something I very rarely hear come up when people are talking about GMing techniques. And so today we're going to ask, what is pacing in a tabletop game and how can you use it as a game master? Pacing in general is how you time the action and tone of your story at the table. It's responsible for keeping energy up and keeping players off their phones and invested in the story. It's also the skill of keeping the narrative focused so the players know precisely what they're supposed to do and aren't distracted by, well, everything. Pacing can be used to set the tone of your game, whether that be fast, frenetic action or a slow, creepy mood build for a Call of Cthulhu game. When it comes to the actual techniques, let's look at things we should avoid and things that might slow down your game. Generally, you're going to want to avoid any sort of pause that is not contributing to the game or the story itself. These speed bumps can create gaps for your players' attention to fall through. One of the most common speed bumps for this is stopping to look up a rule. While it can be important, no one wants their character to die because the GM didn't want to take the time to stop and double check everything was according to the rule set of the game, it can really draw players out. Many times it grinds the game to a halt and takes players out of the action. When you encounter something like this, make a sensible ruling, quick on the fly, and move on with it. You can always check after the game and let players know how you'll rule in the future. If you're not great with the rules, it's okay to assign that task to a player who is. Ask them what the rules say, but remember at the end of the day, it is your call if you think these apply to the specific situation at the table or if you want to use those rules at all. The next most common speed bump, player indecision, not knowing what exactly they're supposed to be doing. We want to avoid a situation where the players don't really know what they're supposed to do next. Remember, the characters are the heroes driving the action. They should be able to tell from the narrative so far what they want to do next. Now, this isn't to be confused with players arguing their options. There's a lot of fantastic opportunity for tension and role playing in those moments. What I mean is that you should work as the game master to establish a strong narrative thread so the players know what follows. Say, for example, your party finds a strange brand on a group of bandits who attacked the king's messenger they happened by and managed to rescue. How would they start an investigation into its origins? Should they follow up with the messenger in the noble court? Or try to track down the bandits to their lair? Why do they particularly care? Obviously, you can't entice every character all of the time, but your players should never be confused as to how they could proceed. This example with the messenger is something that just happened, not the next in a series of events that, put together, create the adventure. You don't want your story to be, well, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. This dovetails nicely with always asking the question, do we actually need to play this scene out? Part of pacing in movies and television, both in writing and in the editing bay, is constantly asking if a scene is driving the plot or the characters forward. Is it revealing character, building suspense, or revealing crucial plot information? At your game table, this might be, is there a reasonable consequence of something going wrong? If not, just cut ahead to the action where that's true. Playing out tracking an NPC contact through a city with no stakes is tedious. You're best served assuming the party can find their contact after about an hour of asking around the city and find them at their local gambling house. Then you can move forward with the interesting bits, like said contact being held for ransom by a rival faction. Writers use a very simple tool called if then in order to build stakes and a continuing flow of narrative. It's a very basic tool of logic. If I eat the cheese, then when my roommate comes home, there will be no cheese, then my roommate will be sad. Or if a rival starship captain reaches the planet Raylon first, then of course he's going to claim it for the Galactic Corporation and plunder all of its resources. You know, stakes. And that right there is the key. In that sentence, we have the stakes, an action the heroes can take, and a ticking clock. Note that this applies to smaller sessions and adventures as well as the overarching story of a whole campaign. Now, most of the time in practice, I find with a tabletop game, especially for longer arcs, you're going to want to have a looser timeline. This allows players to really use their downtime and get invested in a community with these little breaks between these faster paced adventures and still feel that nudging action forward. Building stakes is a skill, but it's also not all on you as a game master. Players, for their part, need to have buy-in for their characters, a reason to care about the world or something in it. If they're all going full murder hobo, someone threatening to depose the king and bring an empire to ruin isn't really a strong motivation. We'll make another video on dealing with murder hobos at a later time, but the short version for this is find something they do care about and tie the stakes to that. Now, that might be a magic item, general riches, a stronghold, a powerful ability, but the key here is that if it's threatened by the villain, the players will jump to action to defend it. And of course, if you're really stuck, just talk to the players. Ask them what their character cares about, and be honest. You need to know what this character wants, so you can give it to them at the end of the adventure. A character who doesn't really want anything also doesn't want to adventure. No one leaves a successful family winery to go hunt vampires. Though debate amongst players can be a ripe opportunity for role-playing and interaction, we also have to make sure that this isn't decision paralysis in disguise. When players actually have too many choices, they can get stuck trying to figure out which way to go forward. It's like trying to get a group to agree on which appetizer to get at the Cheesecake Factory. Look at that list. In a game, they might know they have to get the princess out of the castle, but how? Should they impersonate the guards, bribe someone, scale the wall, launch a full frontal assault? Oftentimes, one of the easiest ways to tell the difference between healthy roleplay and decision paralysis is looking at the clock. How long have they been at this? Are all the players at the table engaged, or are some of them starting to glass over a little bit? If this is a common thread for your group, try giving them a distinctive lead or two. Maybe narrate how there's a whole procession of fancy people and nobles all going, and with a little bit of asking, it turns out there's a feast. Since there's going to be a lot of people there already, perhaps impersonating a duke and his entourage is the easiest way in. Or maybe all the night guard takes their mid-shift lunch break from the same cauldron of stew, and if something were to happen to that, there could be some long lines at the privy. You could give this information as part of a role, or maybe it's just something they overheard in the tavern. No role necessary. These kind of rumors can point a group to a weakness while still giving them their own opportunity to make plans to exploit it. Also, sometimes you just kind of need to nudge your players forward a little bit. Sometimes the conversation at the table gets off topic, talking about what new TV shows and movies we've been watching, and so bringing things back can be helpful. It might be time to interject with a, so we're all going to the Ord system, right? Or is there anything else you want to do or pick up before we keep going with the quest? Give them a chance to pick up those torches and power packs they almost forgot about. Or even just call for a 5 or 10 minute break if everyone's getting a little squirrely and needs to re-up on snacks and drinks. Just be wary of pushing people too early. No one wants to be rushed through a shopping trip and then find out they forgot something important. This sort of nudging can also be useful in role-playing situations, by calling out a specific character. Sometimes something as simple as Rencor, is there anything else you want to do here, is enough to keep pushing the story forward, especially because some players are just afraid to be the first one to speak. However, you want to balance this out with making sure that you're not putting a spotlight on one of your players who maybe just likes to be more of an audience member. They might be happy to be there at the table, playing with everyone, but they don't necessarily want to be the one driving the story. And that's totally fine. You have to know your players and make sure not to push them outside the comfort zone. Another tip I found in more combat-heavy systems is, paradoxically, combat is actually one of the most boring parts of the game. Players wait their turn, roll a handful of dice, do 30 damage, and then have to wait again for their next turn. And that might be 10, 15, 20 more minutes. The nature of it is it becomes a lot of math, and math is dull. I found from my time recapping a turn at the end can help keep energy up. Take the numbers that were just rolled and describe them dramatically. Say a fighter rolled a miss and a hit, doing 14 damage to a lizardfolk who only had 16 hit points left. The lizardfolk blocks your first strike, but that move leaves him open. You lunge and strike at his exposed belly, pulling out however much gore and viscera you like to describe at your table. The lizardfolk staggers, clinging to life. That's something I can picture way better than 14 damage. And even if it's not their character, it can capture the attention of everyone at the table. Of course, you can also encourage this for your players as well. Maybe they have a flourish specific to their character, a finishing move, or a telltale aspect of their spells. Asking a player how an attack plays out or how they react to taking a hit is a great prompt for more role-playing and keeping them engaged at the table. Another thing that I'm sure many of you use already, but some might not, is music at the table. I've personally found it's a great way to add a sense of tone or urgency to a scene, or an extra layer of epicness to a battle. A simple repeating track for battle music or bustling town ambiance can really do a lot to help draw players into the story. It adds an extra layer of immersion to keep energy up and players focused. Video game soundtracks are great for this. In fact, they're designed to keep you focused in. That's why it works so well for study music. There's also a lot of ways your specific musical choice can add and change the tone of your game We'll get into that in another episode. Well, that's just about all the time we have. If you have any questions, concepts, or problems you'd like us to talk about, you can leave them in the comments below, shoot us an email at biscuitwolfgames@gmail.com, or find us on Blue Sky at Biscuit Wolf Games. You can also find our own RPG supplements at our itch.io and Drive RPG under the Biscuit Wolf banner.